Hello, everyone. I am Rachel Bouzaid, and I am a Vedic astrologer and counselor. And today I wanted to do a video on this very important transit that just happened on May 17th, this past Sunday, that we are going to be currently in until 2028, which is Saturn in Revati, the final 27th nakshatra and lunar mansion in the sky of Pisces, signaling the true ending of a 29-year cycle. Saturn is a very slow moving planet. It hasn't been in Revati in Pisces since April 17th, 1998. And to really understand the karma and the cycle of this transit, we have to look back in time as to what was happening the last time Saturn was in Revati in Pisces. So far until May 17th, just a couple days ago, as it's the 19th right now, Saturn has been in Uttara Bhadrapada in Pisces, and there are always going to be three nakshatras or lunar mansions in Vedic astrology within each zodiac sign. So Uttara Bhadrapada is right in the middle, and it comes before Revati, which is also going to be important to understand because Uttara Bhadrapada was in play in 1997, and it's been at play today as Neptune has been in Pisces with Saturn while Saturn has been in Pisces, and it's in Uttara Bhadrapada. So let's start by looking at the current transits, and I'm going to share with you the charts so that you can see them yourselves. So here we have the charts pulled up, and I'm going to start with what we currently have today. So as you can see, starting this past Sunday, the 17th, Saturn entered Revati. It's here in the 12th house. I put it here in the 12th house because Pisces is naturally the 12th zodiac sign, the final sign of the zodiac. Aries is number one. Aries is the birth, the first zodiac sign. And so we want to look at it that way when we're just looking at it generally. Now, for your personal birth charts, right? Pisces could be in a different house. It might not necessarily be the 12th house, but when we're looking at transits and general collective karma, this is what we want to look at it from. This general lens of which house the sign itself represents. So we have Saturn here and Neptune in the 12th house of endings, finality. Saturn is the cold, restrictive planet, right? A lot of people are scared of Saturn. And Saturn gets a really bad, unfair reputation. Saturn is also, it rules Capricorn and Aquarius. It is diligent, it is dutiful, it is karmic. But Saturn, when we're really looking at transits, Saturn is heavy karma, but it is reality and truth. And so when it's in Pisces, which is a sign of spirituality, dissolving boundaries, seeing many truths, seeing everything more as one collective reality, Saturn here is a great grand audit on anything that is watery, leaky, boundless, or needing to be structured. Saturn here wants the truth, it wants reality, it wants structure. So the fact that it's been with Neptune in Uttara Bhadrapada, which comes before Revati, which is ruled by Saturn. So Saturn, when it was in Uttara Bhadrapada this past year, has been in its own placement. Even though Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, Saturn rules the actual star constellation of Uttara Bhadrapada, which is represented by the back legs of a funeral cot. It's all about Saturn energy within Pisces and holding the line, being stable in the darkness, in the depth, in the ending, letting things end. Revati is ruled by Mercury, and the deity is Pushan, the shepherd, who is guiding us home into the journey to complete the entire cycle that we're in. So, Revati is connected to the sacral chakra, the second chakra, where we hold our emotions, where we are fluid and flow with life, our creativity center. It's our emotional center. It's watery. It's emotions. It's your ability to either own them and flow with them or be leaky and boundless. So the core wound of Revati is within the sacral chakra, and because it can be boundless, overgive, and be enmeshed. Also, the fact that it's connected to the shepherd means that it feels it has to be everyone's shepherd, and there is a lot of martyrdom with sacral chakra issues, as that is the shadow archetype of the sacral chakra is going to be the martyr. So, looking from within that framework, this is a huge transit collectively and personally, as we are going to see cold reality around final endings and things that have been illusionary, untrue, and unreal within our lives. So, kind of with that background and understanding, we obviously are already seeing, we have Rahu in Shatabisha, which is bringing light to things that have hidden knowledge, which is why we are all just overwhelmed with information, the Epstein files, right? Everything coming out. But K2 is, and that's in Aquarius. So Rahu is here to expand, to obsess about the collective, while K2, the South Karmic node that severs and detaches us, is in Leo. And Leo is represented by leaders, gurus, patriarchal figures, ancestral figures, leaders, okay? And it's saying no. So we are focusing more on the group collective karmically right now, and we are less interested in putting our faith into leaders or any kind of false guru, okay? So with that energy in mind, Saturn hasn't been in Revati Pisces since April 17th, 1998. And this is what I think a lot of astrologers miss when they are talking about these transits. Transits are a map of our collective karma. Your birth chart is your personal karma. And actually, it's charts because in Jyotish, there are many, many charts that help us understand your soul and your karma. But just thinking of this in a more, general way, transits are very important because they are showing us the collective energy and why things are happening and what is being supported at this time. So we can't understand what Saturn is closing the door on, what Saturn is auditing right now in this transit with Saturn in Revati Pisces, which, by the way, will be in and out of Revati until February 2028. Saturn is going to go retrograde at 20 degrees Revati July 27th, I believe, or the night of the 26th. And then it dips back into Uttara Bhadrapada October 9th, and then it's back in Revati in February of 2027. So it's also a very unique transit because when it was last in Revati, it was in Revati. When it exited Revati, it didn't go back. It didn't go from Aries retrograde back into Pisces. So this is a really big transit because Saturn is really cleaning out the ghosts of the past because, right, the 12th house is also our past, our subconscious. And so Saturn in Pisces is wanting a reality check on all your ghosts in your closet. And it wants to empty it out. Being with Neptune, Neptune is foggy, it's illusionary, it's spiritual, it's mystical, it's intuitive, but Saturn is saying, "Hey, I'm shining a light on all this illusion. I'm bringing truth to all this illusion, and I am closing the door. But first, you got to clean out your closet." And that's why we're going to have this going in and out of Revati because it's going to really force you to make sure that you cleaned your house. So, with that being said, let's look at when Saturn entered Revati last, April 1st of 1997. Here is the chart pulled up of the exact time and day that Saturn went from Uttara Bhadrapada, Pisces, to Revati, the final zodiac, April 1st, 1997. And if you look, it's here again. I've set it up so that it's in the 12th house. Okay. Yes, Sun and Venus are there, but these are very fast-moving planets that are not as important when we're just looking at collective transits at this time. What I really want to focus on is when Saturn entered Revati, it was conjunct or there with Ketu, the South Karmic node, right, that severs things in Uttara Bhadrapada. So Uttara Bhadrapada, like I said, is more about holding the line and staying in the stillness. It's stability, it's structure within Pisces. It's the most serious part or asterism of Pisces. These people, like Uttara Bhadrapada people, are very Piscean, but they're a bit different. You'll notice that they're a bit more serious. They're a bit more able to handle responsibility because Uttara Bhadrapada is ruled by Saturn. So you're fusing the energies of Jupiter, who rules Pisces, and Saturn, which are both very focused on the truth, just in different ways. Jupiter wants to expand and be more big picture. Saturn wants to focus on the cold, hard reality of things. It doesn't want any fluff. So Ketu being in Uttara Bhadrapada at this time is really important because, as I told you, Saturn right now in Revati is not with Ketu, it's with Neptune, which is shining a light on illusions and foggy things. Ketu is the reason why things have been foggy or illusionary. Because Ketu in Uttara Bhadrapada, when Saturn was in Revati in 1997, was dissolving the structures in our collective experience. So Saturn was feeling a lot more, like I said, leaky, watery. Saturn is also anxiety on the shadow side. It is wanting control and structure. And Ketu was there dissolving the structures. Okay. So Saturn showed up in a different way. Saturn wanted stability right away. So Revati is ruled by Pushan, the shepherd, right, that guides us all home. Saturn wanted shepherds. So either at this time, and I ask all of you to go back and look at where you were in your life from April 1997 to April 1998 and what was going on, because this was the beginning of the cycle of martyrdom, of either creating false shepherds, and maybe you created a great shepherd, someone who was guiding you, or you were a guide to others, but there was a leaky foundation with K2 and Uttara Bhadrapada. So Saturn being here again is asking us to completely audit the lack of structure that we first started in 1997, if that makes sense. So, what was going on in 1997? K2 being in Uttara Bhadrapada, dissolving the old structural foundations, our safety nets and boundaries of the world, leaving us all massively vulnerable and creating a structure vacuum. Because of this void, when Saturn stepped into Revati this time, it built glossy, boundaryless illusions of false harmony and safety. This is the beginning of the leaky foundations and the leaky sacral chakra for most people. Also notice that Jupiter is debilitated here in Capricorn. That means it's at its weakest sign in the zodiac. Exalted means it's in its most power, okay, in Cancer, which is interesting because Jupiter will be in Cancer this June 1st until October 30th this year. So the opposite is happening with Jupiter. Jupiter was not in its best placement. It was not in its I can't find the word that I'm looking for. It was not in its highest moral ground. It was not in its dignity. It will be in its dignity in this year when Saturn is in Revati. So Saturn was almost corrupt in 1997. You have Jupiter in Capricorn. So Jupiter is our big truth planet, okay? Jupiter was allowing things to be a little murky. It was also with Neptune and Uranus at this time. Again, Neptune is the fog, the illusion. So not only was Jupiter compromised in Capricorn during this time, it was with Neptune allowing truths and allowing gurus or teachers to be illusionary, to not be what they seem, to be glossy. Saturn was compromised by K2. K2 is a malefic when you're looking at the general transits. It's doing harm. Rahu was in Uttara Bhadrapada Virgo. But then things really shift on June 19th, 1997, just a couple months later, Rahu and Ketu switch signs. So Rahu and Ketu are the karmic nodes that travel backwards, by the way, like always in retrograde. This is really important. Right now, currently, Rahu is in Aquarius, the collective. K2, the severer, is in Leo, which I just talked about. The opposite, it was a nodal inversion at this time. Rahu is in Leo, expanding the need for leaders, expanding the need to rely on a nobleman to take care of us. K2 was in Aquarius, dissolving the collective, our togetherness. So interesting and so important. This is called a nodal inversion when the nodes are flipped. So now this is like super karmic, this transit, and it's really revealing what's really going on. So let's go further. What was going on during this time? Who was in power? Bill Clinton was the president of the United States. Tony Blair was the prime minister of Great Britain. And these are the two that I'm going to focus on because they changed the trajectory of the world during this time. So I'm going to read off some really important things that happened when Saturn was in Revati, April 1997 through April 1998. And I'm focusing on Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. Bill Clinton changed everything for the US with his neoliberalism policies, this new liberalism. And he marketed as liberal, confusing people on the left, his own Democrat Party. But what he was really doing was very unliberal in the sense of the term as we understand it. He opened markets. He deregulated everything. Okay? So on May 19th, 1997, right after Saturn entered Revati, Clinton's National Economic Council Director Gene Sperling sent a private letter to the president giving him an emergency 3-day window to authorize the Treasury to proceed with their financial modernization proposal. Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin rolled out the blueprint in a speech on May 21st, 1997. The Fed quietly eliminated core restrictions. So the Federal Reserve, the money, right? Who controls our money? Eliminated the core restrictions of Section 20 subsidiaries, declaring that the risks of banks handling high-stakes securities underwriting were manageable, effectively signaling to Wall Street that all the regulatory guards are now down. He just gave Wall Street a green light that's never been there before. Okay? So, and then there was an illegal merger. This was in 1998 when Saturn was still in Revati on April 6th. Sandy Wheel from the Travelers Group and John Reed from Citicorp announced a $70 billion stock swap to create Citigroup Incorporated, which became the largest corporate merger in human history. Bill Clinton opened up the floodgates on corporations and banks having no regulation. The merger was explicitly illegal under the 1933 Glass-Steagall Act because it combined commercial retail banking, insurance, and high-risk Wall Street investment underwriting under one roof. Wheel openly admitted to meeting with the Fed chairman, Alan Greenspan, before the announcement, securing a temporary 2 to 5 year grace period. They intentionally built an illegal bank, betting that Clinton's White House would bully Congress into repealing the law before their grace period expired, which Clinton did in November 1999 via the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. Sorry. I don't care to pronounce it correctly. So that was really huge. Okay, so bear with me here. I'm going to throw a lot of facts at you just so you can get the full picture of what Saturn is auditing during this transit in 2026 to 2027. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Bill Clinton also did something very important and crucial to what's going on in Ukraine and Russia today. He expanded NATO. Okay, so July 8th, 1997, at the NATO summit in Madrid, Clinton officially invited Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic to join the alliance, formally tearing up the verbal agreements that we made to Russia during the 1990 German reunification. So why is this an issue? Because we had verbally promised Russia that we are done expanding NATO. NATO is an alliance of Western powers, Europe and the US, right? That is pretty much an agreement that we will all defend each other if someone is attacked. The problem is that that expansion threatens Russia's sovereignty. Okay. So he, instead of, honoring our agreement with Russia, he kept expanding NATO. On a literal Clinton quote, he says, "Today we have taken the largest step yet in the post-Cold War transformation of the NATO alliance. The area of the world where we can be confident freedom and security will endure just got a bit larger. Our overarching goal of a Europe that is peaceful, democratic, and united is within reach for the first time. At the time, was Russia a threat? No. Honestly, Google it. The Expert Warning, 1997. George Cannon, the legendary architect of the U.S. Cold War containment strategy, published a blistering op-ed in 1997 stating that Clinton's NATO expansion would be the most fateful error of American policy in the entire post-Cold War era that would inflame the nationalistic, anti-Western, and militaristic tendencies in Russian opinion. Clinton ignored the warning to secure his legacy. Something I also want to point out about Revati and Saturn and Revati at this time, right? We were looking for the shepherd to save us when things were dissolving and we all felt very vulnerable and unsafe. Clinton was known for using his Southern charm and his diplomatic skills to really come off as someone who understands us and can relate to the collective experience. Both Clinton and Tony Blair were both leaders who used hyper-idealistic emotional language of PR empathy, which is exactly what Revati was screaming for, okay? Revati is the ultimate empathetic, boundless, compassionate nakshatra in Vedic astrology. So I feel your pain. Things can only get better were constant slogans from Blair and Clinton to mask their predatory global capitalism and neoliberal policies that they were pumping out with speed. Okay. So back to it. What else was happening? As if this isn't enough, he's creating tension with Russia, expanding NATO, overreaching. There was also the Al-Shifa bombing. This was a bit after, this was in August 1998, but another vicious example of using an empathy security mask to commit a humanitarian atrocity. So Clinton ordered Operation Infinite Reach, firing 13 Tomahawk cruise missiles into the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical plant in Khartoum, Sudan. This occurred exactly 3 days after Clinton went on national television to confess to his relationship with Monica Lewinsky. The PR spin, the administration claimed the factory was a secret chemical weapons facility funded by Osama bin Laden producing VX nerve gas. Does this sound familiar? This is when things started really getting real, right? With false PR spins and blatant lies about chemical weapons and Osama bin Laden. It was actually a completely innocent, privately owned civilian factory providing 90% of Sudan's affordable, essential anti-malaria and tuberculosis medications. Soil and effluent tests performed by independent American and international scientists under Thomas Tullius at Boston University found absolutely zero traces of chemical agents. Because Clinton destroyed the nation's primary medical supply line and refused to apologize for it or pay them any kind of compensation, the resulting medicine shortages caused tens of thousands of unrecorded silent civilian deaths across East Africa. That's still happening. Okay. Now, let's look at Tony Blair because these two guys work together, and we all know the US and Britain work together to control the world. Tony Blair with his, it's only up from here PR campaign. And what I also am going to point out later, but I just want to keep in mind, right? The Epstein files have released. Bill Clinton is a part of the Epstein class, really deep into all of this pedophile, sex, crime stuff. Epstein and Trump and Clinton, all BFFs. Well, Tony Blair was too, and his circle with Mandelson and the others was very important. And so it's really interesting, right, that while the nodes have flipped, Rahu is now in Shatabisha, all of this is getting revealed about the same people that were leading us during the nodal inversion in 1997 and 1998. So Tony Blair also bypassed standard democratic governments to hand public infrastructure over to private equity because that's what these guys were doing. They were giving the banks and the corporations even more power that we have been dealing with today. And I'm not blaming everything on these guys. This has been a systematic buildup, but this is when things really got super illusionary and out of hand. And what's interesting about both of them is they both used empathy, Revati, that push-on shepherding energy to lead us through the lies and deception of what they were really doing. In 1997, after his landslide victory, Blair and Chancellor Gordon Brown bypassed standard civil service protocols and bring the City of London billionaire Geoffrey Robinson into the Treasury as a paymaster general specifically to fast track PFI, which is private finance initiatives. The corporate task force in September 1997, Blair's Treasury formed a highly aggressive hidden PFI task force led by commercial lawyer Adrian Montague, who proudly described his team to the press as a real strong team of young Turks. Well, the reality is that the Young Turks team was entirely composed of corporate lawyers, investment bankers, and consultants from firms like Arthur Andersen. They systematically rewrote UK procurement rules to strip local councils of legal protections, forcing the public sector to absorb the financial risks while locking schools and NHS hospitals into toxic 30-year compound interest contracts that are expiring in structural bankruptcy today. So May 1997 wasn't a time of cool Britannica, Britannia, and progressive hope. It was the month the Young Turks took over the UK Treasury. And this was all during the Saturn Revati transit. July 1997 wasn't about peace in Europe. It was the expansion of a military alliance that would upset Russia to the point where of no return. I mean, seriously. Show April 1998 wasn't a triumph of financial modernization. It was an explicitly illegal corporate heist. Another big thing Clinton did and is known for is he signed a death warrant for the American banking safety net. He destroyed Glass-Steagall Act that was passed in 1933 after the Great Depression. It built a strict wall for retail commercial banks, making it forbidden from them for playing in the high stakes casino of Wall Street's investment banking. But Clinton signed the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, completely obliterating the 66-year-old wall. He didn't sign it reluctantly. He was celebrating it. He smiled, proudly declared, "This is a very good day. It establishes a modern framework for the 21st century. It will enhance the stability of our financial system." Guess what? It did the exact opposite. It allowed commercial deposits to be leveraged into insane, complex Wall Street gambling schemes. It directly birthed the too big to fail banking mega cartels. Clinton's economic advisor Larry Summers and Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin pushed this aggressively. And right, you saw this whole illegal mega merger of Citigroup profiting directly, that really triggered the 2008 global financial crisis. I mean, this was the setting up of this new world order. It was the death of the old world order that we knew, and it started this new crazy deregulated order that we're in today. He signed NAFTA in 1993. So that was a really big deal, claiming it would, create an explosion of high-paying American export jobs, but it really just made it harder for the American working class, abolishing tariffs between the US and Mexico and Canada, giving corporate monopolies and opening license to close down high-wage American manufacturing plants, yada, yada, yada. I don't want to just keep listing out things he did, but I will say that he's also known for the mass incarceration machine, which I want to talk about because this was the most vicious example of Clinton's empathy facade. Okay. While playing the saxophone on Black entertainment networks and positioning himself as a close ally to Black America, he actually signed a bill that systematically destroyed entire generations of Black families. This was prior to Saturn and Revati, but in 1994, he signed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, known as the 1994 Crime Bill. He spinned it so that we were taking back the streets, protecting communities, and acting out of deep compassion for victims of violence. I mean, it was a whole PR campaign where he was showing empathy for all the families, that are victims of violence, and he is going to come and save us, that Revati Pushan. But what actually happened was it was the largest federal expansion of the of the prison system in the US history. It poured $9.7 billion in federal funding directly into building massive new prison complexes and hired 100,000 new police officers trained in hyper-aggressive military tactics such as the three strikes rule, the truth in sentencing initiatives. For instance, it gave federal cash to states only if they changed their laws to ensure prisoners served at least 85% of their sentences, effectively banning early parole. We are like sentencing people to life. I mean, and it doesn't even matter what they did or how good they act, they can't redeem themselves. Then, he reinforced the brutal racist federal sentencing disparity around crack and cocaine. So possessing 5 grams of crack cocaine triggered the exact same mandatory minimum 5-year prison sentence as possessing 500 grams of powder cocaine, which is, predominantly used by white elites, right? Under the Clinton administration, the US prison population exploded from roughly 1.3 million to over 2 million people. The incarceration rate for Black men skyrocketed to historic catastrophic levels, hollowing out entire Black neighborhoods, turning fathers into corporate prison labor, and stripping millions of Black citizens of their voting rights permanently through felony records. So, in 1999, he repealed Glass-Steagall Act. So pretty much there was no regulation for Wall Street and they can do whatever they want. And, using the folksy Southern I feel your pain mask to mask what he was really executing. And it was the beginning of the corporate takeover of the modern world, and it was the ending of any kind of state regulations that we had in place, that we knew, that we were familiar with, and that we felt kept us safe. Because right after Saturn is in Revati and Pisces, it goes into Aries, starting a completely new cycle, in this case, a whole new corporate world order. So, with all that being said, the only other thing I just didn't mention was, Tony Blair's connection to Peter Mandelson. He was Blair's strategist. he was close with all these guys that the Epstein files have now revealed are all disgusting sex addict pedophiles. Okay? So, this is the karma that Saturn is auditing. So, it's not a surprise or a coincidence that Bill Clinton is being revealed right now. And if we look at Bill Clinton's birth chart, I'm going to pull it up here. He is a Virgo rising. His sun is in the 12th house of Magha. So in 1997, 1998, Rahu was in Leo, expanding his sun, which, by the way, is in the 12th house of doing hidden things, right? So he was saying one thing and he was doing another. And it was expanding that. I mean, he just probably felt bigger than life. And for Tony Blair, but now K2 is just entered Magha, which is where his sun is in Leo here in the 12th house, this April 20th, and will be there until November 25th. K2 is severing his literal ego, his sense of self. And it's no surprise it's in Magha, which is all about ancestors and the patriarchy and upholding traditions. This is all going to end for him by the end of the year. The karmic nodes are saying no more, dude. And Tony Blair, let's see. For him, all of this was happening on his 4th house of the homeland and the 10th house of his career and reputation. What's interesting is that at the time this was all happening is that K2 was actually severing his reputation and his career. And then he was inflated in his homeland, his country, and place of birth. So that's really interesting with Tony Blair. And I also did look at President Trump. What was he up to in 1997? Well, because he's our president right now. And so is he connected to this Saturn audit in Revati? What is Saturn asking for karma? For truth, from reality, it's asking for the karmic debt from Trump as well. In May 1997, the last time Saturn was in Revati, exactly one day after Tony Blair won his landslide victory, and this is Trump's chart right here, Donald Trump and Marla Maples announced their official separation. What's interesting about that, right, is Rahu in Leo. Well, to be fair, Rahu didn't change to the nodes until June, but that's what's so interesting about astrology is sometimes things do happen right before the actual transit or after. It's more of like a baseline. So Rahu in Leo was on his ascendant, expanding his sense of self, while K2 in Aquarius is in his relationship house. And so K2 is severing a relationship and expanding his sense of self. So by September 1998, he met Melania, his current wife. So that's interesting as well, because at that time, the nodes were still there. So what else though was going on with Trump? So Saturn in the 8th house for him, Saturn in Revati Pisces is his 8th house. That's like restructuring your hidden debts, your inherited money, your money from others, especially your spouse. And in the 1997-1998 era for him, he was restructuring his personal debts and corporate assets to survive a multi-billion-dollar crisis that he was just bankrupt. So he was reinventing that for himself, trying to end his bankruptcy, his debts, reinvent himself, go into the next chapter. And now Saturn is magnifying those foundations that were leaky and probably full of lies and untruths. And it's asking for an audit. And it's sitting again in his eighth house of hidden assets, other people's money, and he is literally restructuring the executive branch as president and trying to do literally the same thing that he did to himself in 1997 and 1998. But now he's trying to apply it to the American government. So when we look at this timeline, we can start understanding what Saturn is auditing and asking for the ghosts of the past to be revealed today in this transit. So Saturn in Revati now is right here. It's with Neptune. It's not with K2. It's not compromised. And instead of Jupiter being debilitated in Capricorn, where the truth was too hard to see, Jupiter is going to be moving, I'm going to put it just a month ahead, into its favorite place, Cancer, June 1st. And Jupiter expands what it's in. Jupiter will be expanding the truth, Dharma. That is what Jupiter is about. It's also about the homeland in Cancer, emotions, emotional wisdom, but Cancer in, transit-wise astrology is the home, the truth about the homeland. So now we also have Rahu and Shatabisha in Aquarius, expanding the collective, expanding hidden knowledge. It's also showing us, Shatabisha is also hidden knowledge, specialized knowledge, and it loves hacking. It loves hacking the system. It loves finding shortcuts or quick fixes. So Saturn is here to reveal what is just another hack versus what is a real foundation. And so I'm going to move it back to Aries being the ascendant, because what does this all personally mean for us? So we understand the collective karma with, I probably gave you too much information about who is involved and what is being audited. This new corporate world order is literally being audited, and it's being revealed. K2 just moved into Magha. This is important because in 1997 and 1998, during this transit with Saturn and Revati, the Rahu was not in Magha. It stayed in Uttara Falguni and Purva Falguni in Leo. Now, Magha, and these are the nakshatras of Leo, by the way. Magha is the first nakshatra of Leo. And like I said, remember, Rahu and Ketu, the karmic nodes, go backwards. So they start at the end of a sign and go down the sign. So now it's in Magha, the last nakshatra of Leo, and it's literally saying no to patriarch. Magha is ruled by K2, so K2 is in its own placement here. So it likes that. And it's about having a headless ego, headless leadership. We are done with all of the ego in our leadership, and we are done with all the false gurus, literally. Saturn here is bringing a harsh reality and truths to illusions so that we can start this new cycle in Aries with a clean slate. And K2 is saying death to the patriarchy. Literally, yes, I say that because I think there will be a lot more females in power because of this transit. There is a male element to Magha. Not always, it can just represent traditions and whatnot, but it's also very interesting that when Saturn was in Revati in 1997, Princess Diana died. Another big ending of a martyr, a collective martyr, right? Someone we were all collectively enmeshed with. There was an ending. Very interesting. This is all connected. So personally, when we're looking at the general chart, we're going to have Saturn here in Pisces in the 12th house and Mary's as the rising sign. Okay. So Saturn aspects 3, 7, and 10 from itself. Saturn is aspecting 1, 2, 3 Taurus, 4, 5, 6, 7 Virgo, 6th house, 8, 9, 10 Sagittarius, the natural 9th house. So let's break that down. Saturn, that means Saturn isn't just affecting Pisces. It affects what it's aspecting. So Saturn on its third aspect hitting Taurus. That's the second house in the birth chart. The second house, Taurus, represents our family of origin. That means that this is going to be heavily an audit on your family of origin and its foundations. Are there false shepherds in your foundations with your family of origin? Are there leaky or a lack of boundaries? Isn't an illusion. It's also the house of your worth and your values and your speech. You will no longer be able to speak illusions. Saturn is cracking down on our speech. It's cracking down on what we value and what we deem worthy. It's cracking down on our assets and our literal comforts and foundations. Literally, that's Taurus second house. For the 7th aspect, directly opposing, that's the 7th aspect, see, directly opposing. That is the natural house of Virgo. The 6th house represents our day-to-day, our debts that are known, our competition, and our known enemies. So this is giving a very cold responsibility. No more emotional entanglement or enmeshment with your known enemies, and you need to be real and truthful and have a responsibility towards them, meaning the enmeshment phase, the seeing them in a glossy white or having all this Revati empathy for them is over. It's time for you to see them for who they are and have your boundaries. It's also here cleaning up your debts. On the 9th aspect of Sagittarius, I'm sorry, the 10th aspect of Saturn is Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. It's very interesting how Jupiter and Saturn are in just so much synastry during all these transits. This is the house of the father, teachers and gurus, and your belief systems. Saturn is auditing your teachers, your mentors, and your belief systems, and your false gods. Are they real? Are they built on something sustainable? Things with the father might come up, or anyone who is a father figure to you. It's not always your biological father. It's here to close any chapter with the father with the teacher, with father figures, of enmeshment and lack of boundaries, and any kind of martyrdom or leaky sacral chakra energy. So I hope that helps you understand on a personal level what it's focusing on for you and for all of us. Now, on your personal chart, right, if Saturn in Revati is hitting any of your natal planets in Pisces, you're going to feel this more than someone else. If it's aspecting, if you have planets in any of its aspects of Taurus, Virgo, or Sagittarius, you're going to get hit more than someone else without those placements. And it depends on which house it's in. So, for instance, if you are a Sagittarius rising, number 9, Saturn would be in your 4th house of your inner happiness. It is literally auditing your emotional stability and inner happiness, and it is not allowing you to martyr or hide here in your emotional kind of safe space. It's going to be aspecting your 6th house of Taurus. So that would be, like I said, that would still be included in the one we had where Saturn was in the 12th house of Pisces, because Virgo is naturally there, but this time it's Taurus, so it's still going to focus on a Sagittarius's 6th house, which is debts, known enemies, competition, work. It's also asking you to master your daily routine, your work, your acts of service. Things with pets could come up during this transit. 6th house is also pets. And then it's going to be directly opposing your 10th house. So no more hiding, and it's asking for responsibility in your career or your reputation, or for you to finally look at the structure of your career and your reputation, and also any kind of martyrdom or just false foundations. And then it's going to be on the 10th aspect, hitting your ascendant, yourself, creating a lot of responsibility and a literal audit on your body. I also want to say that Saturn in Pisces it could bring up stuff with your feet. So take care of your feet this year and next year. Go to do feet reflexology. It really helps. Um, Massage your feet with sesame oil before you go to bed. Take care of your feet during this transit. And I just want to say that in 1997, when Saturn was last in Revati, on a personal level, you were vulnerable. The foundation that you felt safe in was severed by K2, and you let a false shepherd take over your life, or you became a false shepherd to others. You signed a contract at this time in 1997 and 1998, which will be personal to each of you, that was due to vulnerability and wanting to fill a vacuum of stability. You were looking for a Pushan, a shepherd to guide you home. Now, whether that was your family of origin, a significant other, a cousin, a friend, this is all what I want you all to focus on, is what was going on in 1997 and 1998, because that narrative is dying now. So Saturn is no longer panicking in the vacuum of K2. It's traveling with Neptune, draining the entire swamp of generational illusion. K2 is on its own throne in Magha and Leo right now, cutting off the fuel supply for false leaders, and Rahu is amplifying Aquarius, the collective. handing us the keys to take back our power and our emotional boundaries. When Saturn slips backward into Uttara Bhadrapada October 19th, it might feel like it, but it's not a setback. It's the universe verifying when the old ghosts knock on your door, there's no more martyr inside left to answer. So I hope this breakdown of Saturn's karma and Revati helps you understand on a more precise and robust level what this transit is truly about. It's actually really exciting, as hard as it is going to be for most of us. You know, seeing a cold reality of things that we have wanted to stay illusionary is always really hard. Um, and collectively, it's going to be really hard, but we're going to see the endings of a lot of things that are rotten. And we're trying to set up a new cycle, and it's very intense because Saturn is going retrograde into Pisces until 2028. And so it's really like making us validate if we have cleaned out the ghosts of our past or not. It's going to do a couple check-ins. It's going to say, hey, good job, but did you really do a good job? Let me check. Are the foundations solid? So that's what this transit is about. You can see the leaders that were at play that I think are going to have a huge reckoning during this transit from now until 2028. They are getting literally audited by Saturn. And you know, they're just a few of many. So don't blame it all on them. They're part of a system that is also being revealed to us, that this is a system. And the universe is trying to show us that the people are the power. You don't need a savior. You don't need a hero. We need ourselves. We need each other. We are the power. So keep all this in mind. Let me know if you have any questions. That was a lot. And I just hope that this gives you a more clear understanding of these transits, because it's not like an isolated event. You have to look at what happened before. The last time these planets were in these placements to understand the story, to understand the karma. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and namaste.